tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts.
Good morning. Welcome everybody to the Greater Marysville Tulalip Chamber of Commerce, our Business Before Hours program. Very excited to bring you the Candidates Forum today. Real quick, I wanted to touch on this form that is in front of you on your table. This is our annual awards. At our chamber dinner and auction this year, November 29th, we're actually going to be giving out these awards to the businesses in the community, and we would love your input on different businesses that you feel have made a difference in this community. So we only have 5 categories this year. If you could just take a quick look at it and jot down some ideas or thoughts, you are welcome to leave it at the front desk on your way out or email or mail it to us, but we want to make sure and get your input. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chairman of the board, Jack Schumacher. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the Greater Marysville Tulalip Chamber of Commerce Canada Forum meeting this morning. Today's forum will provide a revealing look at State House Representative races 38th and 44th District. Marysville includes 3 districts within the boundaries. The 38th and 39th, which we covered at our luncheon earlier this month, and the 44th. We'll also have an opportunity to meet and hear from the pro and con sides of Initiative 1631, the carbon emissions fee measure. I'd like to recognize some of the elected officials we have in the audience this morning. Senator Keith Wagner. Good morning. Marysville Council members Camille Norton, Steve Miller, and Mark James. PUD Commissioner Sid Logan, and Snohomish County Council Nate Nearing. And hopefully I got everybody. Yes. Oh, and Tribal Chairman Mel Sheldon. Sorry, Mr. Mel. Okay, first of all, I'd like to introduce our today's sponsor from Edward Jones, Lance Curry. Morning, Lance.
Morning. Thanks, Jack. Good morning. By the way, so you might have noticed there's a little bit of a motif going on, and just so I'm not too much of a distraction later on, I probably should show you this real quick. Okay, are we good? We good? Okay. All right, thank you for letting me sponsor this event. It's a real honor, and it's a privilege to stand before you and be able to speak for 10 minutes or something like that. I just want to go ahead and start off by introducing my company, myself a little bit. Edward Jones, founded in 1922, serves investment clients in the U.S. and Canada through our branch network of more than 14,000 locations and currently has relationships with over 7 million clients and over $1 trillion in assets under care. We focus solely on individual investors and small business owners. We're not a corporation, we're a private partnership, which enables us to make long-term decisions because of our independence from shareholders. We focus on individuals, not institutions, on financial goals, not hot products. We are individual branch offices in local communities. I spent 7 years in active duty Air Force as an Arabic language translator. In 1997, I separated from service to start a rental company. We were able to sell the business in 2005 when I started with Edward Jones. And so I started gaining clients as a financial advisor. And just 1.5 years before the greatest economic recession of our collective lifetimes. Now, 12 years later, I serve over 400 amazing families and individuals, and it is a privilege to me. My teammate Kathleen and I have a unique vision which compels us. We strive to become the premier provider of financial solutions in the Marysville area by helping our clients achieve their long-term goals while delivering an ideal client experience. Our mission is threefold. We want to understand what's important to you. We will build financial solutions tailored to you. We will keep you on track for your goals. Sounds simple, and it is, but anything of high value, which seems simple, is never easy, as we know. There are risks. Today's talk, Standing Guard, Protecting What You've Worked For. That's the official title, but I'm going to come at this topic from a little different angle than most financial seminars might take. We only have time for me to present one way to protect your finances. There's a lot of risks to investing in financial decisions, but there's one that stands above them all. My topic would be better titled The King of Risks. It's you. We can blame a lot of things for financial hardship, loss, and even ruin. But we all know the biggest ingredient to your financial outcomes is the person in the mirror. The decisions you make are the single greatest asset you possess and the greatest liability. You as a decision maker are really two different people, a rational person and an emotional person. I'll explain. You've all heard a certain investment phrase, and you know it well. In fact, as I say this phrase, you all probably in unison will be able to finish it for me. It's pretty easy. Buy low, sell. Wow, you guys are right on it. Good job. Very good. So ideally, you would buy when prices are low and sell when prices are high, right? Sounds easy, sounds simple. Now, there is what we call a market cycle of emotions. You know how the market cycles, market prices as a big group, they all kind of together go up and down, don't they? In a big macro view, investment prices tend to move like a herd of buffalo. All right, one big old group. You and I get told by our emotions that when prices go up, we should feel good about that. And would you agree that most people feel good about their investments when market prices go up? Okay, in fact, we are then most likely to want to buy investments when we can look at their histories and see that they've come up for some time. We feel good about buying them. I mean, I think most people would agree with that. This is simply called buying high. Buying high feels good. I mean, it's up in price because everyone wants it. And if everyone wants it, then so do I. Emotional decision. Probably not a rational one. The opposite of buying high is selling. Right. Bad decision, Jack. No, it's good. Selling low feels really good. Feels good. When you get your statement month after month and that price is lower and lower, all it does is go down. I mean, if we're in economic recession, that horrible feeling is only compounded by your well-meaning family and friends, radio, TV, news. It's all beginning to talk about how bad the market is, and some might even boast how they just decided to get out. Businesses are laying off. People are out of work. People can't make their mortgage. Money is tight, and you definitely aren't feeling good about your down statement. So you reach a point where you join the crowd. You sell out. Whew, I'm done. I'm out. Felt good. Buying high and selling low feel good. They always do at the time. And it's an easy decision to make, but it's an emotional decision. Okay, I'm not going to give you any solutions. Now, don't get me wrong. This obvious concept is simple to talk about, but hard to put in practice on your own. Looks good on paper, but the reality can often be far different. To avoid the trap of investment emotions and greatly reduce your risk of buying high and selling low, I've got 4 big points to leave you with. Don't try to time the market. Don't chase hot investments. Don't panic during crashes. They happen often. And use a competent, credible financial advisor. That person works for you to help keep you on track for your financial goals. My name is Lance Curry. I approve this message, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
I knew something like that was coming, Lance, with the tie, and you look pretty sharp today. Thanks. So your business would be mentioned in all promotional pieces, distributed over 1,200 businesses and individuals if you are interested in sponsoring one of these events. You'll have a dedicated display table by the stage to promote goods. You will receive 5 full minutes of time on stage to speak to up to 120 audience members. You can display a multimedia presentation before and after the feature presentation on several large video screens, and your whole presentation will be broadcast on television. Each event is filmed and will be aired on Marysville's public access stations, Comcast Channel 21 and Verizon Channel 25, as well as uploaded on Chamber's YouTube. Okay, let's get going on our event today. Serving as today's moderator is Al Aldridge, Senior Vice President of Strategies 360. Al is past chairman of our board of directors. He's on our Government Affairs Committee and currently serves as the ongoing respected member of our board of directors. Please join me in welcoming Al Aldridge.
Well, good morning. Before we jump into this, I also want to recognize a couple of other elected officials who have joined us. State Senator Steve Hobbs from the 44th, and 2 other Marysville City Council members, Rob Toyer and Michael Stevens. Thanks for joining us today. Well, thanks to all of you for coming out this morning for this exciting event. In each of our races, if you will, including the initiative campaigns, we'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement by each candidate. The person going first in each case has been chosen by a coin flip to keep it impartial. Then we move to, following the opening statements, a series of questions developed by the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to the questions posed, and they'll alternate positions on that. These questions have been developed, as I said, by our Government Affairs Committee at the Chamber. Very similar format will be used for the pro and con portion of it on Initiative 1631. In the second segment, candidates will pose their own question to their opponent. In this segment, each candidate will have up to 1 minute to frame their question and ask it, and then their challenger will have up to 1 minute to respond to it. In terms of our timing and flow, Lance Curry, who you have met just up here at the microphone a few minutes ago, is our timer today. Thank you, Lance. He will signal when candidates have reached the 1 minute remaining mark, also when they reach the 30-second remaining mark, and when they are to stop. If you fail to stop, as in finish the sentence you're in at that point fairly quickly, you will be reminded that you've run over your time by this. So with that, let me first introduce all of our candidates and speakers up here this morning. Starting on my right, we have John McCoy, the incumbent state senator from the 38th District, and Savio Fan, the candidate for state senator in the 38th District. Then we have Mark Harmsworth, who is the incumbent state representative in the 44th District, and his challenger, Jared Mead. And over on my left, we have Julia Sanders with Global Ocean Health. Have a little more information on her when we get to that section, and Randy Peppel on the no side of 1631. All right, we're going to move into the Senate race first. So with that, we'll move to opening statements, up to 2 minutes each, and John will go first. And yeah, there you go.
Good morning. Again, I'm State Senator John McCoy, 38th Legislative District, which serves Tulalip, Marysville, and Everett. I've been you're a legislator in one capacity or another for 16 years, 11 years in the House and 5 in the Senate. So I've enjoyed doing my work and working for the citizens of this district and helping move forward. I've assisted the jurisdictions, all of them, in moving economic development activity, providing them tools for them to be able to attract those businesses that they're interested in. We brought a lot of transportation dollars into the district. Transportation dollars, we kind of joke about Tacoma in that you keep building roads and they keep getting filled. And that's what they do. You build a road and it fills up to capacity right away. And which leads us to, I'll be answering that question with these others later. So, again, I'm happy to be here, and I request your vote. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Savio Pham, and I'm running for State Senate. 28 years ago, my family and I migrated here as political refugees from the communist Vietnam. My father was immediately imprisoned by the communists after the fall of Saigon. They put him in the so-called re-education camp, but in fact was hard labor camp with physical and mental retribution. I experienced firsthand the unfair treatment toward me and my family by the communist Vietnam. Coming here with virtually no English at age 18, I faced and overcame many challenges in seeking a better life and achieving the American dream. I realized that the American dream is just not about reaching success. It doesn't end there. But the ultimate dream is to help others in need so they too can stand up and achieve their own dreams for themselves. That's why I run. I want to give back. I also run because the elected leaders in Olympia have put parties' interests above wishes of the people, provide benefits freely for illegal immigrants while leaving our veterans and our citizens homeless and can't afford to attend higher education. And they turn to socialism in order to win votes. We know where socialism will lead us. Just look at Venezuela. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to sharing with you more information.
Thank you. We'll turn now to the first question prepared by the Government Affairs Committee, and for this answer round, Savio will go first. Question is, what do you see as the top issues for the 38th Legislative District, and how is that different from the top priorities of the state legislature? And what are your strategies for those top issues? So, Savio, you go first, up to 2 minutes.
Thank you for the questions. The three main issues that I am running on. Number one is to create affordable living in our district. And what I mean by affordable living is just not housing. It's about jobs, about quality time for families. It's about kids growing up having face time with their parents. I also want to fight against the opioid crisis because that has spread too much and destroyed our community and destroyed our youth. And third, I want to bring family wage jobs to the regions because that you can also fix the transportation issue. When we have quality jobs in the regions, people don't have to drive to different cities, and that contributes to the congestions. Now, I want to focus on the opioid crisis. I attended the memorial for victims of the opioid crisis in Everett a couple of weeks ago. And what I see is that while we spend too much dollars onto fixing the issue, but we're missing two main parts. Number one is once you detox a person and help them get out of that situation, you should also help them to get trained, to get skills, and to get jobs so that they can go on and live quality for their life. And number two, we also put in programs so that we can stop kids from coming into the issues. That means we should have good wage jobs so that parents can spend more time with them at home. We have to build neighborhood safety, school with quality so they can be safe, they can feel good going to the school, meeting each other, and spending quality time with each other. Thank you.
John, same question for you. What do you see as the top issues for the 38th Legislative District? How are they different, if any, from the state legislative priorities? And what are your strategies for those top issues?
The top issues that I see are around environmental, education, and ensuring everyone has access to the internet. On the environmental, we have a lot of activity going on the waterfront. After Kimberly Clark left, there are some environmental issues that still need to be taken care of there. And then in North Everett, we have a Roscoe former site, and there's still arsenic in the soils. And we're meeting with the neighborhood committee to discuss how we're going to work with that and ecology. Which brings us to the environmental funds. We need to stabilize that account. It's been rated, and so we need to stabilize it so that we can do the environmental work. Education, there's another question on that later, but primarily we knew that the McCleary fix wasn't perfect and that we would have to come back and do some more work on it. So that work will need to continue. And then we have areas in Everett that do not have internet access. So we need to continue to work on that and also help our rural areas get access to the internet. So again, a lot of the issues around the homelessness, drug abuse, and those activities that need to have services for them.
Thank you. We'll move to the second question now, and John will go first in response on this question. Topic is education. A little background here. The legislature passed legislation to address the McCleary Supreme Court decision and provided additional funds from the state level to school districts around the state. However, the Marysville School District was negatively impacted by this, as were many other school districts around the state, because of the impacts on the local levies. For example, Marysville's local levy amount dropped by approximately 60%. Marysville schools are only able to collect about half the funds per student compared to some other similar-sized districts around the state. The legislation is also short-term in terms of the funding and may cause layoffs through school districts around the state within just 2 years. So the question, given all that, the question is, how do you propose to fix these discrepancies throughout the state? And John, you go first.
As I mentioned in the previous question, the McCleary fix was not perfect. And we struggled with that through the session. And over the years, there were various attempts at fixing McCleary, and so they've all kind of compounded the issues. And so we're basically wrapped around the property taxes. That's going to have to be revisited, and we stabilize that and create a system where everybody participates. And because there were some unintended consequences a few years ago when the first attempt at property taxes. So we need to continue to work on that. The regionalization funding didn't work out the way we expected it, so that has to be revisited. So we have a lot of work to do on that. Although we have some challenges in our education funding, we're a lot better off than most states. But we still have a lot of work to do. And so we'll continue to work on that until we make that a fair and equitable system throughout the state.
Thank you. Savio, your turn to answer the question. Basically, how do you propose to fix the discrepancies throughout the state that existed out of the McCleary legislation?
Well, basically, you can't have a temporary fix to another temporary fix. And that seems to be what's going on in Olympia now today. So we need to look at the issue holistically. You know, number one, you got to curb the monopolies in education, and that is public school. You know, private school, charter school, homeschool provide alternatives to taxpayers when public school fail to deliver. If you think that charter school is a bad idea, you should get rid of the Running Start program. Because the Running Start program is only work when the district where they don't have enough seats for students in high school. Then they push on, they recommend, they try to get students to go to community colleges to go through the Running Start program so they have that seats for others. And they would divert that funding to the community colleges. If you don't believe me, talk to the community college administrator. I've taught community college for a number of years. I know that's what's going on. So is that a form of charter school? Yes, it is. And number two, you need to increase the support for vocational training so that individuals can support themselves. Not all can afford to go to four-year school. So they need training, they need skills, so they can have good jobs. And then finally, we need to reform the financial aid so that we can help students that, I met this student once where she's 19 years old, and she couldn't receive any financial aid because they count her parents' salary. She didn't have any help from her parents, so she couldn't go to school. She had to go to work. So we need to make sure that those who want to go to school can have the funds to go to the school.
We'll now turn to our third question from the committee. It's on economic development. Savio will go first in answering. In the 38th district, what do you see as the biggest economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with it? And Savio, you go first after you finish your drink of water.
Thank you. Well, I think number one, we need to get rid of complicated regulations and requirements that purely for collecting fees. You talk to small businesses, they cried about all the regulations that they have to adhere that enhance nothing other than paying the money so that the city, local city, county, or the state have the funds. We need to get rid of that so that business can thrive. We also need to make it easier for startups to hire the first 5 employees. How many of you here have your own company, have started up by yourself? If you do, you know that if you open a company today, right, the next big hump that you have to go through is to hire the first employee. That is so difficult. And a lot of people choose to go to 1099 instead of hiring their own employees. So we need to find a way to help this startup to hire the first 5 employees. And we can do that by giving tax credits to this company so they can actually hire and train employees and don't have the burdens of having those first 5 employees. And also, we should require companies to hire local trained and educated employees as opposed to go overseas and bring them in. You know, we give credits, we give tax cuts to these companies that hire local graduates so that our people have jobs and they got trained. I know it takes some time to train the person from after they graduate to the point where they can actually produce for the company. So we should somehow give tax credits or tax cuts to this company to promote hiring local employees.
Thank you, John. Same question to you. In the 38th district here, what do you see as the biggest economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with it?
There's a lot of conversation around this one, and it all boils down to affordable housing. We have very limited affordable housing stock, and is what we're seeing throughout the region is that there are a lot of businesses in downtown Seattle, but in order to work in Seattle, you have to live in places like Marysville, Arlington, Darrington. So there's a lot of traffic on the roads now because of that. Affordable housing within. So we're starting to see Everett grow, Marysville grow, but the housing stock is not keeping up. We need to take a look at what can we do to work with developers in creating affordable housing stock so that we stop folks from going further out and creating congestion on the interstates, which then again we have to work on how we move traffic through the region because we can't build any more roads. There's no more land. So we have to be smart about how we move the traffic and where people live. And the jurisdictions within the 38th, they need to come in and talk to us about what tools do they need to attract businesses to their district and what help they need for affordable housing.
All right, thank you. We'll now move to the phase where the candidates get to ask each other a question. John will go first, and he'll have up to a minute to pose a question to Savio, and then we'll turn the tables and go the other way. So, John, up to 1 minute to pose a question to Savio.
Well, through the years, this question always comes up, and I don't particularly care for it. This is about the issues. So again, I guess my question back to Savio is, what issues are you going to be working on? So that's it.
Thank you for the question, Senator McCoy. Well, my response to that is those are the three main issues that I mentioned earlier that I'll be working on for the district and for the state. But I bring a broad experience in education to Olympia. I'm a very successful technology executive. Was a chief technology officer of the biggest accounting firm in Kansas City once. I'm also a business owner, a very successful IT consulting, and I have taught at college and universities for a number of years. So I have a wide range of experiences together with my educations, and that's what I tend to use to work in Olympia.
All right, thank you. And Savio, it is now your turn to take up to a minute to ask a question of John, and John will have up to a minute to respond.
So my question is twofold. So two issues reported earlier by the Everett Herald in two separate occasions. Number one, your Democrat challenger concerned that you won't serve a full term if you get reelected. And number two, you violated the largest campaign finance law by failing to disclose almost $40,000 for the period of 2 years. So my question is, number one, can you look directly into the audience today, and for those who will be watching the debate today, and tell them that you will serve the full term if you get reelected? Not just intend, but you will serve full term. And number two, how can people trust you, your accountability and competencies when you fail to report thousands of dollars you receive? Granted that it might have been at the fault of the consultant that you trusted, and hired.
Would you repeat the first question?
Yes, the first part is a concern that you won't serve the full term.
I've built a reputation over the years that I'm true to my word. So I'm running for office, and I fully expect to serve out the term. The second part of the question, there were some extenuating circumstances surrounding the accounting of the funds. My treasurer did send a letter in explaining the position, but primarily we got caught in a situation where my treasurer and his wife went through medical episodes. And it was during a time when I was not doing any campaigning, so we weren't really collecting any money. And so we were found in violation of some reporting because of the credit card people were taking a fee out, and they didn't get reported in time. So I could not, I was really worried about my treasurer and his health and getting through that, and all was resolved before filing, and all monies were accounted for, and the PDC was satisfied with all the action that was taken.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to turn to the race for State Representative Position 2 in the 44th Legislative District. And we'll start with opening statements of up to 2 minutes each, and Jared Mead goes first.
Well, thank you. I want to start by thanking the Chamber, thanking Al, and all the candidates, including my opponent, for being here. This is my first forum, so I'm excited for the experience, so thank you all. I'm a Snohomish County guy, born and raised. My family moved us to Mill Creek when I was 8 years old. I currently own my home in Mill Creek now with my wife. We're expecting our first son in January. That's where I plan on raising my family as well. I've been very involved in the community for a long time. I served on the Planning Commission in Mill Creek for a few years before I was elected as a city council member, which is where I currently serve in Mill Creek. I've seen over the last decade or so the growth that's been impacting our county and that everybody in here has seen impact our county in a multitude of ways. That's why I'm running for office, is to try to start managing this growth a little bit better than it has been over the last 25 years. We're seeing issues in our transportation infrastructure on Highway 9 in our district, on the US 2 trestle. We're seeing issues in our education system. We have an overcrowding problem. I graduated from Jackson High School 10 years ago, and there was 3 portables back then. This year, because of the overcrowding and all of the families that have moved here, we've got 30 portables going up next year at Jackson High School. So that's a huge issue that I want to address as well. And then our property taxes, last but not least. Snohomish County families have been burdened heavily with rising property taxes. 1, because our property values are skyrocketing, but 2, because the state legislature's McCleary decision put the burden on the property owners. So those are the issues that I want to run on. Those are what inspired me to throw my hat in the ring. And I look forward to talking about those issues a little bit deeper as we get into these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And now opening statement from Mark Harmsworth, the incumbent.
Well, it's great to see all your faces this morning. It's Friday early, so what possessed you to get up and come and listen to a bunch of politicians this morning? You're all mad. My name is Mark Harmsworth. I am the 44th representative. I've served in this position for 4 years. Prior to that, I served on the Mill Creek City Council for almost 2 terms, and have enjoyed the service and just being part of the community and helping folks get things done. One of the things that I learned while I was on the Mill Creek City Council is that sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference in people's lives. It can be a change in an easement. It can be a change in something we're doing with a statute. And it makes a huge difference. And this is what politics is about, because it's all local. It's about having access to people that are willing to listen and are willing to work with you on issues. I get so many calls from constituents. You wouldn't believe the types of issues that we get. And some I can't talk about. Some are very hard issues. But lots of these issues may seem small to a legislator or a state government, but to people it's really important. And that's what's important to me, is getting out there and serving people and making sure that we make our communities better. We're going to get into the issues here a little bit, but top the ticket, I think, specifically in the 44th, is going to be transportation. Lots of folks are trying to get to work. They're trying to get down into King County and to other areas in Snohomish County. And they just can't get to work right now, and we need to be working on that. Our schools, we've made historic investments in McCleary. We've got a little more to do. But we also need to be protecting our property tax owners who are expecting a big decrease next year as part of that decision. And that's going to be important as well. And then thirdly, in economic development, we've got a lot of jobs in our county, but we need to get the burdens off our small businesses, medium-sized businesses, so that we can actually start creating those jobs. I own a small business, and I participate in several different areas generating revenue, and I know how hard it can be to get things up and running. So I appreciate you coming out this morning, and we'll get into this debate, I guess.
Thank you. And we'll move into some of those issues in a little more detail now. First question, Mark, you'll be the first to respond to this. What do you see as the top issues in the 44th District, and how is that different maybe from priorities of state legislature, and what are your strategies for those top issues?
Well, I've already talked about just listed off the three issues in the opening statement there, and I don't see them necessarily being that significantly different from the legislators' goals, although I'm in the minority, so I may have a different idea, of course. But there are a couple other things the legislators proposing this year. Capital gains tax, which ultimately is just ruled by some folks up at the federal level, is classified as an income tax. We've seen the carbon tax initiative that's on the ballot this year, and various other, you may not have heard about the low fuel carbon tax that was proposed last year as well, which decreases the efficiency of gas by 10%. And you may ask, why am I talking about these? Because these issues, as far as the legislature goes, are going to affect our small businesses and our medium-sized businesses and even our corporate businesses here in this state. If the legislature and the majority party goes through and pushes these taxes through, it's going to be a huge impact to our communities. I mean, you can see the price of gas, the price of fuel, and these different things going up and just hurting both our communities and our businesses. Obviously, in transportation, tolling appears to be the way the state WashDOT wants to go. As you know, I'm very much opposed to that on both 405, the US 2 trestle, and the recently announced I-5 plan from here, Marysville, right down to Lakewood, where they want to toll I-5 now too, one of the lanes. These things affect our communities, and so it's important the legislature really listens to people, as I was saying earlier, in the communities and figures out what's important. Sometimes they have ideas which they think are great, but then when you put them down practically in the district, it's just not going to work. And we need to find more ways of using the money that the state's got. It's got record revenues right now, and it needs to be much more efficient in the way it's using its money. I think I'll leave it at that. We obviously need to go back to McCleary, but we're going to talk about that here in a second.
Thank you. Jared, same question for you. What are top issues as you see them in the 44th Legislative District? How is that different perhaps from priorities of the state legislature, and what are your strategies?
Yeah. So I would agree with Representative Harmsworth in the sense that I don't think the issues affecting our district are too much different than the issues that the state is trying to deal with. When it comes to education and transportation, those are probably the key issues in our district right now. Like I said in my opening statement, the growth right now is affecting our district very heavily. Snohomish County is one of, if not the fastest growing county in the entire state. King County is no longer the fastest growing county. We are. And so we have these issues, and I think the way that you can address them is by fighting hard as a coalition in Snohomish County with our legislators. Republican, Democrat, shouldn't matter. Fighting with each other to get prioritization for our county. So getting funding for our transportation needs. I think adding some lanes is some of the answers to some of our transportation issues, like on Highway 9 or potentially the trestle. But a lot of it also has to do with incentivizing companies to try to find innovative ways to address how they incentivize their employees to satellite commute, for instance, or flexible scheduling. Ways to keep people off of the roads or on the roads at different times would help a lot with our transportation issues. But a lot of it's going to have to do with us just fighting together, Republicans and Democrats, to prioritize Snohomish County. And I think we can do that. We're going to be able to affect some of the education issues as well in that sense by addressing them as a unit. I think that's what it comes down to in Snohomish County, is being able to work together. That's how we can respond to some of these issues. Another state level issues that I'm really interested in getting involved with is our mental health crisis. We lost federal funding recently because of the way that we've mismanaged the mental health crisis in our state. I think that we can do better to have more localized mental health facilities. The statistics have proven that we've been looking at mental health all wrong, and I think that's something that we're going to have to address in the legislature. So as a statewide issue, that's something that I'm interested in also affecting. But I notice that my time is up, so I'm going to move on.
Thank you both. Let's dive into the education issue again. As we said before, the McCleary legislation that was approved by the legislature provided additional state funding to school districts around the state, but it changed the way local levies can work, and Marysville School District was negatively impacted, as were many other districts around the state. Marysville levy amount dropped by about 60%. Meaning they can only collect about half the funds per student compared to some other similar-sized districts around the state. Also, some of the funding is short-term, and many school districts have identified that they may be doing layoffs in as soon as 2 years. So, how do you propose to fix these discrepancies throughout the state? Jared, you go first on this one.
So the McCleary decision, first off, took 8 years or so. It took a lot of smart legislators on both sides of the aisle to craft this ultimate decision that they made in order to fix the education deficit. So I don't think that we need to go down there and blow the plan up. But I do think there are some things that we can change, there's still a lot of work to do, as we've heard already. I think a piece of that is the fact that we have this discrepancy of what we're allowing school districts to raise, either $1.50 per student or up to $2,500 per student, whichever one is less. I think that we can affect that differently by saying whichever one is more. That would be a change that we could do without blowing up a McCleary plan and driving us into a McCleary 2.0, but still help school districts like Marysville, where the property values might be different. So it's harder for those districts to raise money. It'd be a lot more equitable to be able to raise the same amount of money per student, no matter where they live. I think that's very important. But other things in our education system that we should fix, right now it's based on a singular property tax. There are other ways of potentially raising more sustainable, progressive revenue to get us off of the fluctuated property tax model. And I think that we could look at those things as well to get some property tax relief for folks. There's also, we mentioned earlier, regionalization. There's a big issue with regionalization. I don't think it happened exactly how the legislator meant for it to happen. It's a complex issue, but something that I'm looking forward to also addressing when we get down to Olympia.
Thank you. Mark, same question to you around McCleary, school districts, et cetera. Up to 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. So McCleary, as has already been stated, was a very complex piece of legislation. It's not perfect. As an example, I don't think we've got our special ed set up correctly. We're going to need to make some changes there and some additional investments. However, the principle behind McCleary was to relieve our local school districts from paying for basic education. And so part of it was defining what basic education really is, and then taking that responsibility over at the state level. So what we've seen in the last 12 months as the state has taken that over is an increase in our local property taxes. The corresponding decrease comes in 2019 with a local levy cap that comes down. Now, each individual school district has different property values and different calculations, as already been mentioned. But the school districts are also responsible for making sure that they put together a sustainable plan. And we've seen, and I don't know the specifics on Marysville right now, but we've seen other districts that have credit plans where they will run out of money in the next few years. And it's important that the legislature understands the districts that are working in good faith and the ones that have given out too larger amounts of money, rather than thinking about the long-term picture here. when they show up in the legislature asking for more money, because this is actually borne on the backs of our property tax owners. As far as shifting that, the only revenue stream that I've seen proposed by the majority party right now is an income tax or a capital gains tax, which is just another way of creating another revenue stream the state can now tap into out of our hard-earned dollars. We have a lot of little things that we probably need to do with this, but the important thing is that that local levy cap stays in place. We may need to look at it from a holistic perspective across the whole state on how we're funding McCleary. But right now, I think we need to sort of let this thing play out and see how things work, and then rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, try to come up with some small changes that will help our individual districts.
All right, moving to our third question on economic development. After all, it's the Chamber that's sponsoring this forum. In the 44th District, what do you see as the biggest economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with it? Mark goes first.
It's going to be transportation. I mean, it affects everything that we're doing as businesses, as commuters, as employees, and owners of businesses. Being able to be mobile and get out there and deliver our products and services, get to work, and deliver those products and services, and then during the day as well. The issue with many of the state's plans on transportation right now is that they just assume that everyone is an employee and they go to work in the mornings, and they don't really think about mobility for businesses that have no choice. I run a small consulting business. I have I have a partner and several folks that I work with. And I don't get the choice of going to work at 9 to 5. I'm all over the Puget Sound area during the day, and I'm commuting sometimes in the morning very early, and sometimes I go mid-morning to avoid those traffic jams, obviously. And we need to think about this holistically from that perspective. The other thing I think we need is comprehensive B&O reform. I just paid my quarterly B&O, $2,000, and I'm double paying because I subcontract through another company for some of my work. So they pay B&O on me, and then I pay B&O through my own company. Well, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And so we need to start looking at maybe a net process there that's based on actual profitability rather than just gross income on these things, and understanding the regulations that are imposed on our businesses that really hurt us. Because when you remove those regulations, you start seeing the ability to hire more people and create more jobs in our region, which obviously benefits everybody. So I think a couple of those things are going to be really important for our district. But down the top issue there, I think, is just mobility through transportation, and then reform in our regulations on our small businesses.
Thank you, Mark. Jared, same question to you. Biggest economic development issue in the 44th, and how do you plan to deal with it?
So I agree with Representative Harmsworth that transportation is a huge issue for economic development in our district specifically. We get traffic jams north-south on 9, east-west on the trestle. No matter what, our businesses are struggling in order to move their employees and their freight to and from. So transportation issues need to be addressed, and that's going to help us a lot. But we talked a little bit about transportation, so I also want to mention, and nobody's mentioned this yet, we want to try to keep jobs in our area, in our region, and Boeing, for instance, they've got their new plane, and we got to make sure that we're fighting to keep that plane here. That's going to help a lot of, or that it's manufactured here. That's going to help a lot of our small businesses. It's a lot of jobs, working family jobs here, but it's also a lot of manufacturing industry in our area that's affected by Boeing, and we need to make sure as a legislature that we are friendly enough and keep Boeing here, keep Boeing's plane manufactured here. Also, SeaTac has already said that they are at their freight capacity, or they're going to be very soon at their freight capacity, which means that's an opportunity for us in Snohomish County with the Payne Field Airport and potentially being able to ramp up there, and that's a lot more jobs we get to add here as well. So there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of opportunity that we have in the future in Snohomish County. We just have to have a legislature that's friendly enough and able to kind of guide that into our county, and so that's what I plan to do. I think that's going to help economic development greatly in our region.
Thank you. Now we go to the candidates asking each other questions. Jared will go first and have up to a minute to ask Mark a question, and then we'll flip that around. So Jared, go.
So Snohomish County legislators have a very unique burden. We have to be able to work with people from both sides of the aisle all across the state better than anybody else, better than any other legislator. Seattle kind of has the representation of the Democratic Party, King County centric. And then the Eastern Washington is represented a lot by the Republican Party. So neither party is really fighting hard for Snohomish County's needs, whether it's left or right. So that's why our legislators need to be very effective at fighting for us with both sides, right? So that said, our two most important people, elected officials in our state when it comes to transportation issues are Judy Cliburn and State Senator Steve Hobbs, who are the chairs of the Transportation Committee. Both of these legislators have said that Mark Harmsworth is a very difficult person to work with. They've said they don't trust him, and they've said they don't respect him. He'll deny this, but I have an email from Judy Cliburn who said that she had to kick him out of a transportation meeting because she was unable to work with him. So the question, I'll get to the question is, that said, how can the voters of the 44th District and Snohomish County trust that you're going to be able to effectively fight for our needs when you can't work with the most important people in our state and you're not even at the negotiation table to fight for us?
Well, thanks for the question, Jared. Just to address a couple of points there, the committee that Jared's talking about here is the Budget Committee, and the chair and the ranking members through my ranking member told me that they had shrunk the group because we're in an off-year budget, so all the assistant ranking members were removed from that committee. So that's what happened there, at least that's my understanding. As far as working with others, I've passed, because I focus on policy and local impact, multiple pieces of legislation with my Democrat cohorts. And I think sometimes that doesn't get seen because your name is not on the legislation. Did you know, in fact, I wrote the biometrics legislation that passed in this state. It's not under my name, it's under a Democrat's name, because I want the policy more than I want my name at the top of the list. And that's really important to me. As far as working to get things done, we don't always agree. And it's important to understand that if you can't put something in a box and move on and work with each other for other things as well, which I've demonstrated I can do, then it's a sad state of affairs. And we need to be really focused on making sure that we can compartmentalize the decisions that we make.
All right, Mark, your turn now to ask a question of Jared, up to 1 minute to pose it, and Jared, up to 1 minute to ask, or to answer.
Obviously, tolling is a huge issue in our region. And recently in an online forum, you indicated that you supported a toll on the US 2 trestle. And in the Seattle Times editorial board, that you also indicated that the 405 toll revenue you thought was a good idea for paying for projects, which would obviously indicate that you support that as well. Both these, and this was written and taped format that you've talked about there, both of these things obviously have a huge impact to our district, both economically and on our citizens. The tolling that they put on 405 is set at $10 right now. They've proposed anywhere between $5 and $6 on the trestle. How high do you think this toll needs to go before the state needs to decide that this isn't the way to go?
Thank you for the question. I never once said that I supported a toll on the trestle, so that's not true. In the Seattle Times interview with the 405 tolls, I also did not say that I supported the 405 tolls. I had many concerns with them, and it's taped, so we can find that. As far as the US 2 trestle goes, I've publicly stated that I do not support a toll on any of the current lanes that we have on the trestle, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. But it's interesting that you brought the trestle toll up. That's what your campaign has been about. As most people in our district are unaware, intentionally on your part, the district or the state passed a study for the US 2 trestle, 2-year, $250,000 study that you voted for. That's what you're referring to when you're fear-mongering and telling everybody in Lake Stevens that there's going to be a trestle toll, a $5, $6 trestle toll or whatever you've been telling people. That's not true, but what it does is it scares people into getting you some cheap votes, and you can put a provocative bumper sticker up there and it works. But it doesn't do anything for the working family that lives on 20th Street that has to travel to Boeing twice a day, or the working father that has to come home to son or daughter's football practice. I'm a candidate about solutions, and you can't just say no to everything and get anything done for our community. I'm about finding solutions. So for you to say hashtag no trestle toll and make this big issue out of something that was so small, it's not helpful to our district. It's not helpful to finding solutions for the families. I'm going to find solutions for the families, and that's how I feel about that.
Time's up. All right. Thanks to both of you. We're now going to turn to Initiative 1631 about carbon fees. And with us here today on the pro side to speak to it is Julia Sanders. She's the Deputy Director of National Fisheries Conservation Center and its Global Ocean Health Program, as well as editor and main author of the Ocean Acidification Report. Julia first started working on marine and fisheries issues at Pacific Fishing Magazine and has worked with the seafood industry for 15 years. She also works directly with stakeholders in many coastal communities. Speaking on the con side is Randy Pepple. He is a consultant and spokesperson for No on 1631. Randy has over 30 years of public policy experience across the state, has served as top aide to elected officials from Congressman Rod Chandler to Attorney General Rob McKenna. He's long been active on policy issues that impact business communities, including serving on a number of association boards. With that, we will turn to 2 minutes of opening statements. And Julia, you get to go first on a 2-minute opening statement.
Okay,
Should be
sorry.
on. There you go.
So I will just say quickly that I am not here on behalf of the I'm not an employee of the Yes on 1631 campaign, but instead our nonprofit works with tribes, the commercial seafood industry, and rural communities. And I'm here because we worked with them, put hundreds of hours and muscle and energy into making sure that their viewpoints were represented. So 1631 essentially puts a price on pollution and invests it in solutions, and that's the key part, that it's invested into solutions. So nearly $1 billion a year would be put directly into clean energy, energy efficiency, and climate resiliency projects. Businesses and homes will qualify for things like heat pumps, solar panels, more energy efficient boilers, cold storage systems, LED lights, electrical vehicles, all the hundreds of things that can improve efficiency in businesses and homes. It will be spent also to protect us from a changing climate, so things like flooding in Marysville and the wildfires that have caused the smoky haze, scratchy eyes, and scratchy lungs that we're getting used to every summer. 10 states in the U.S. already operate under price and invest policies like this, and despite what opponents say, they don't break the economy, they actually improve it. Saving consumers actually billions of dollars in energy and health costs. But it does cost oil companies money, and that's why they're here and investing $20 million in the No campaign. I honestly believe that this is the best thing for Washington, and it has represented more than just the urban progressives that started the initiative and come to include many other constituents, including the tribes, rural communities.
Okay, thank you. Speaking in the con side, Randy Pepple, 2 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all this morning about an issue I think we all agree on, which is effectively addressing climate change. And my name is Randy Pepple, and I'm a spokesperson for the Vote No on 1631 campaign. Simply put, this 38-page initiative would force Washington families, small businesses, and consumers to pay billions in higher costs for gasoline, for heating fuel, for electricity, while exempting many of our state's largest polluters and providing virtually no accountability for how the billions would be spent. As someone who's worked in public policy for over 30 years, my experience leads me to ask you this question and consider these facts. First, 1631 claims to be a fee on big polluters, but it exempts 8 of the state's 12 largest emitters of greenhouse gas. Why? These exemptions include our largest polluter, a coal-fired power plant. That makes no sense. Second, there's virtually no accountability for how the billions in 1631's new taxes will be spent, and no guarantee it will be effective in reducing greenhouse gases. 1631 instead creates a 15-member board of unelected political appointees to spend the billion it raises, with no plan or specifics for how the money would be spent. The lack of accountability is stunning. Third, 1631 is unfair. From nonsensical exemptions for big polluters, to raising taxes most on people who can afford it least, to establishing a tax that never ends with no limit on how high it can go. 1631 is just plain unfair. Consider the position of noted scientist Dr. Cliff Mass. He joined our coalition because he thinks 1631 is such bad environmental policy, it would block any truly effective action on climate change for a decade or more. We can and must do better. That's why I'm here on behalf of the No on 1631 Coalition, representing tens of thousands of working families, small businesses, farmers, consumers, and taxpayers who oppose this measure and urging a no vote. Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn to the first of the three questions from the Government Affairs Committee. First question is around cost. Randy will go first in answering this. With the reported immediate increase of about 15 cents per gallon on gasoline and yearly increases included, how do you see this tax affecting people in their homes, businesses, and governments? For example, costs of utilities, transportation, freight, food, etc.
Thank you very much. First, the initiative admits that it will cut jobs in manufacturing. So that's the first thing the impact will have. It will reduce jobs. Second, it will make our tax system more regressive because you're passing the costs along to the people who can afford it the least in electricity, gasoline, and utility bills, which, as we know, disproportionately hit those in low incomes more. Third, it reduces our state's competitive advantage we have right now. And Al and I worked a long time ago on a project on hydropower. It reduces our advantage of low energy costs in this state. And it's not just gas prices that we're talking about. Heating fuel, natural gas are also impacted. The Washington Policy Center just put out a study that points out that this will cost $200 to $300 per family in the first year and go up to somewhere north of $700 by 10 years. I mean, simply put, this is a tax on our economy. And the yes side can call it a fee all they want. But the reality is you're going to be paying for it at the pump every time you fill up your car. You're going to be paying for it every time you turn on the electricity in your house. You're going to be paying for it every time you turn on the heat. I mean, this is no way to look at our economic future by raising costs on ourselves for something that doesn't have any real impact. And put that money into the hands of a 15-member appointed board that has no accountability for anybody on how they spend that money. The proponents can say all these great things they could spend the money on, but there's no requirement that they actually do so. Thank you.
Thank you. The reason that it's called a fee rather than a tax is because taxes can be used to do many other things. They can be taken by politicians and put towards education or bridge building. But a fee has to be used for what it's raised for, which means that the income must be used to reduce carbon emissions, to reduce pollution in the state of Washington. There's also specific language that makes sure that low-income and vulnerable communities will not have to bear any additional burden from this. Now, there will probably be a price at the pump and on the electric bills and other energy costs, but it will be paying for things like heat pumps, solar panels, and these other investments that we would all love to be able to make, but most can't afford to do. And they will greatly decrease those energy costs. So when you have those kinds of efficiency technologies that you can invest in, that are paid for you, that provide unlimited lower energy costs for you, I think in the end everybody wins, except for the oil companies. But I think that we will see our economy grow. It's true that manufacturing jobs may be lost, but we expect 40,000 jobs to increase. And for those that are eased out of businesses that lose workers, they will be supported and given money for new job training and more clean energy jobs. So I think there's a really good system here that will protect everyone and ensure that people are given the tools they need to help become part of the solution. instead of being part of the problem.
Thank you. Second question, and Julia, you'll go first on this one in terms of response. 1631 has laudable goals. If it is enacted, how will we know in, say, 3 to 5 years, for example, that the money is doing what the initiative says it will do? So, for example, how will we know if we're producing cleaner air, cleaner water, et cetera? And if you are familiar with what kind of measurements or metrics will be used, we'd love to hear about that also. Julie?
Well, the most important piece will be how much have we reduced emissions? How much lower are our carbon emissions as a state? That will be the key metric by which this is measured. In addition, when you talk about clean air and water, any project that receives funding will require measurements that can easily show what achievements and progress have been made in that. So I think it's fairly easy to show what kind of progress has been made. But the crucial part of that is tackling these climate change problems at the root by reducing emissions and showing just how much we can achieve. In 9 states on the East Coast, from Maine to Maryland, they have been able to consistently exceed their expectations and reduce their emissions many times more than they expected, because it's been so effective when they invest in solutions, when they invest in efficiency. It grows jobs, it grows the economy, and everybody wins.
Okay, thank you. Randy, same question about how will we know in 3 to 5 years, for example, that the money is doing what it says it will do?
Well, the quick answer to that is we won't, because there is absolutely nothing in the 38 pages in this initiative that defines what metrics you have to follow, what metrics you have to meet for this to be deemed a success. It's one reason why former state auditor Brian Sontag, a Democrat, is opposed to this initiative, because he says there's no way to audit it. There's no measurables in this initiative. And most troubling is that this unelected board reports to itself. It gets advice from state government, but it gets to review its own performance reviews and approve them. Now, I don't know about you, but if I get to grade my own tests, I get really good grades. And that's what this initiative does. And even worse, the board gets to have taxes keep going higher if it doesn't meet its goals. Think about that for a second. In what other endeavor are you rewarded for failure? And that's what's in this initiative. And it's instructive that the yes side says that emissions are going to be reduced. There's absolutely nothing in this initiative that says that emissions will be reduced. It talks a lot about fees that are going to be put in place, which are just taxes on working people. But there's nothing in here that says we will reduce X emissions by X date. I mean, that's the reality of this initiative. It's a lot of promises. It's a lot of, hey, we could do these things, but there's absolutely nothing in the initiative that says we will do these things. And finally, to talk about the eastern states and what they're doing, they're not under this program. This program that is in I-1631 has been tried nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world have voters voted this type of tax on themselves for such an unproven policy.
So the third question has to do with exemptions. Randy will go first on this one. We alternate positions. 1631 contains exemptions for several categories of business, as has been mentioned. Why should there be exemptions, and how was it determined who would get the exemptions? Randy, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. First and foremost, the exemptions were decided behind closed doors by the people who were drafting this initiative. It was not in a public legislative session. The public, the media didn't have the opportunity to say, why are you drafting it this way? It was decided in private. It appears that the exemptions mainly exist for one purpose, and that's to single out one industry. The people who wrote this initiative do not like the fossil fuel industry. They do not like the energy producers in this state who provide our gasoline and electricity. And so they use the exemptions, frankly, to buy off the support of other industries and to try to build their coalition, I guess. And while these exemptions cannot be taken away, and there are 23 industry sectors that are exempted. And as I said, 8 of the state's 12 largest emitters of greenhouse gases are exempted. That never goes away. The board does have the ability to add more exemptions if they're so inclined. So if reducing emissions is truly the goal of this initiative, if that's what this was about, you wouldn't have exemptions. You would just say, we're going to reduce emissions by this amount, and here's how we're going to do it. And here's what happens if we don't meet that. It would not draft an initiative that says, well, we want to exempt most of the large emitters, including the largest single emitter in the state, the coal-fired plant down in Lewis County, which produces about 5% of the state's emissions. We're going to exempt those industries. We're going to focus on one industry. And, if we fail, we get to keep raising this tax. So it's just the wrong way to go.
Julie, your turn, up
Thank
to
you.
2 minutes.
The coal-fired plant is not included because it already has a shutdown plan that it will be completely out of operation by 2025. So we did not interfere with that plan that was already in place. As far as the other exemptions, they don't actually make that much of a difference in terms of revenue, but many of them are the lifeblood of this state. So when it comes to fishermen and farmers, those people that put dinner on our plates, they get exemptions. They don't have a workable option to go electric. So they are exempted, as is aviation fuel. And then the most energy intensive companies, those that they have no choice but to use a ton of energy, like steel mills and paper and pulp mills, they get exemptions too, because it would have been an unfair burden to them to pay that. So that is the reason, and I was behind some of those closed doors that sound so ominous, that exemptions happened. And I would just like to say that there is so much more that I would like to add. But price and invest is a policy that has proven. This is a unique version of that, but we feel confident that it has many things built in, and it has the goal of reducing emissions by 20 million tons from 2018 levels by 2035, at which point the tax would stop rising, or the fee, excuse me. So there are limitations, there are measurements, and that will wrap me up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn to our final segment where Randy and Julie get to ask each other a question. Julia will go first. You'll have a minute to pose a question to Randy, and he'll have a minute to answer, and then we'll turn that around and Randy gets to ask you a question. So Julie, your turn to ask Randy a question regarding the initiative.
All right. Well, I just want to say that the initiative very clearly outlines the fact that the revenue will be used to reduce emissions, and that it is a great group of representatives of a wide variety of industries that will be representing the oversight boards and reporting to the governor and the departments of commerce and other agencies. Why do you feel like that provides no guarantee of actual emissions reductions?
Well, thank you. I guess the first thing I'd say is I don't feel it provides any guarantee because there is no guarantee. I mean, you can look at the initiative. You will find nothing in here that says we have to reduce emissions by this and here's how we're going to do it. Nothing. And even more, typical, I think, of something that was written behind those ominous closed doors is that on page 2 it goes through a list of here's how we're going to spend the money. We're going to spend 70% on this. We're going to spend 25% on this. We're going to spend 5% on this, after reasonable administrative expenses that we could get into. But on page 3, you turn it over. On page 3 it says the board can change these allocations to advance the mission that they support. They do not have to follow the very prescription that they tell the voters is the reason for the initiative.
Time's up. Okay, Randy, your chance to ask Julia a question, up to a minute to ask it, and Julie, up to a minute to respond.
Thank you. I've belabored this point, but I think it's an important one. The initiative is very clear on who's exempted. I mean, it lists them out, lists the 23 industry sectors. And it does not have to reduce their pollution. You know, the exemptions are off the hook. Yet, there's not a single quote or citation in the campaign itself and in the initiative itself on how it will do what its supporters say it will do. And I mean, if you look at it, this brochure claims 1631 will reduce pollution. And so my question to Julia is, can you tell the audience where in the initiative, where it mandates that pollution will be reduced, that it guarantees it will be reduced, or any requirements that pollution will actually be reduced? Where is it in the initiative? And by the way, you can't find it on their website. The pro side won't even put the initiative on their website. So could you tell me where those guarantees are at?
Well, I will agree that it doesn't say promise that we will reduce by a certain amount, but it does say this money will be spent on these things. And so when you spend money on reducing emissions, on efficiency technology, on preventing communities from having to deal with the cost of flooding and wildfire and all the other climate change effects, that automatically guarantees results. We've seen this over and over. There's dozens of countries and states throughout the world that operate under these type of carbon invest systems, and they have all performed marvelously. The ones that fail are the ones that take the money, tax people, and then give the money away. We were very much against Initiative 732 2 years ago, which was another carbon tax, but it didn't have the plan to work. It wouldn't have invested in solutions. This does, and this does guarantee that it will reduce emissions and reduce pollution in Washington.
Running for public office or public speaking on initiative campaigns is hard. I think we can all agree with that. So I would invite you to join me in expressing our appreciation for all of these folks for coming here today and sharing their thoughts with us. The Chamber's mutual goal today was to present the candidates and issues in a fair and impartial format that will aid citizens in their decision-making process when casting their ballots. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully, and please return your ballot by November 6th. With that, I turn it back to Chairman Jack Schumacher.
Okay, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Lance Curry. Thank you very much, of Edward Jones. To our candidates, best of luck to all of you. To our Government Affairs Committee, thank you for the time you put in putting this program together. To our partners, the Tulalip tribes, for all the delicious breakfast they offer and the great customer service they provide. Also, to 564 IT for video editing, the cable showing, and the Chamber YouTube channel, and to today's facilitator, Al Aldrich. I would also like to mention the upcoming events we have with the Chamber. Small Business Summit is going to be held at the Marysville Opera House, October 2nd from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's a free event. Our next business before hours, Friday, October 26th, speed networking. The Chamber's 4th annual Christmas dinner and auction called Home for the Holidays on Thursday, November 29th, right here at the Tulalip. Thank you for all coming today, and have a great Friday.